Happy Sabbath again, everyone, and I wanted to thank everyone for the kind words and messages sent to Kendall and myself following our feast in Israel. Thankfully, we ended up flying out on our original flight, but with a little bit of anxiety along the way. After about 4 hours in the airport, all of the adrenaline that was in our systems crashed once the wheels took off, and it actually helped us sleep on our long flight home. After the I'll call it chaos of October 7th, because of the planning and flexibility of Frank Fish and Charles Malier, a lot of other members were able to continue their feast and spend a couple extra days in Jordan because the flights weren't going out. And for some other members, like my grandparents, they were stuck in Jerusalem, so they have plenty of interesting stories to tell, but a lot of that is just sitting in the basement, waiting to get out and get over to Jordan. I will have to add my favorite message, and I'm a little upset that Mark isn't here, Mark Graham, but I am going to add this, and if he's listening, I'm going to try my best to portray it. And after our 8th-day services, and we were frantically checking the news and checking our flight status, I got a Facebook message from Mark Graham. He was sending us kind words, and he was saying that our safety and our safe travels were in his mind. Now, it wasn't necessarily content of the message that made this one stand apart. He sent it to Kendall, to myself, to my parents, and my grandma. And I said, "Thank you very much, Mark, but I find it a little weird that you didn't send this message to my grandpa." Now, because he doesn't have caring and kind words for my grandpa, I guess. Now, I can make that joke because I know he's good friends with my grandparents, and whenever I have a chance to embarrass Mark, I try to. So if he's listening, I'll probably have a text waiting when I get back to my seat. So this was a feast and a trip where I learned more about the history and more about Scripture than any other feast. After services, we would spend the rest of the day touring, and our tour guide, he was a middle-aged Jewish man. He grew up in a kibbutz. He met his wife, who grew up in a neighboring kibbutz, and after they were married and after their first 2 kids, they both moved to the States and attended Duke University to study the New Testament. So as somebody who grew up in Tel Aviv, grew up Jewish, he then also went back to study the New Testament. And this guy could talk. If we were touring for 6 to 8 hours a day, he was probably talking for 4 of them. He had a knowledge of the Bible that was very deep, both, spiritually, as he grew up in the Jewish community, but also educationally, as he grew up studying it. He was very open to talking to us about Jewish history in Jerusalem, and he also talked with us a lot about the life of Jesus, and he knew a lot about it through his studies. He also spent a good amount of time talking about Jewish culture in Israel and Jerusalem, as well as life in general in Jerusalem, with it being a very dense area with tensions always on the rise between Jews and Muslims in the area. And I'll tell you that I am very happy to live in the United States. The most conflict I have with my neighbors is when my dog barks at my neighbor's dog. But I'm not afraid that Amanda's going to go inside and open fire because of the whole thing. No, instead, we both stand there calmly, tell our dogs to sit, and once they're calm, we let them play. And then once they're tired, everybody's happy. Although Avon, Ohio is more spread out and it's a more peaceful area than Jerusalem, there are many groups of Jewish people who live in the city of Jerusalem and the country of Israel who have the same amount of peace of mind that I do. It doesn't matter where they're walking at night. It doesn't matter if there are missiles being intercepted overhead by the Iron Dome. Many Jewish people have 100% faith that God will protect them anywhere. They aren't afraid to walk anywhere at night, even under threat, because they have a complete belief that God will protect them. And that is incredible. When I first heard it, I thought, I wouldn't have that same belief. That's crazy, to walk in areas that are war-torn and have confidence. But it is truly incredible that they have 100% belief in God's ability to protect them. Today, I'm going to tie that observation to 2 points about having peace in God's presence. You and I are called into God's family, and we are put to the test. We have rules to follow, and we have examples to follow throughout the Old Testament and throughout the life of Jesus. But we are not put into a world of complete peace and tranquility. So my first point today is peace from physical threats. And today, the media is covering two major wars. There's the war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza. And although these wars are concentrated to relatively small geographic areas, there are impacts all over the world as our societies are so intertwined. And specifically, the United States as a global leader is intimately involved and entwined in these conflicts. Although the war in Gaza primarily focuses on Hamas and Gaza, it also extends to the balance of life and power in Israel and Palestine. And that is a game that the United States is involved in. In Israel, you could hear the Iron Dome interceptions overhead, but the Jewish people of Jerusalem were unafraid. When we were at the airport, there was a point in time where we had to drop everything we were doing and run to the stairwell to get down to the basement. There were sirens going off, and there was general chaos. But when we got about 2 stories down, there was a worker from the airport in Tel Aviv who said, "It's okay, this happens every so often, give it 10 minutes and we'll be back to normal." And then she said that peacefully, calmly, and then went back to scrolling on social media and her phone. After she said that, and we're standing 2 stories down, people are screaming and running and pushing and shoving. But most of those people, you and I understand, and the Jewish people there understand, just didn't have a faith in God's protection, and they also had a belief in their government and the Iron Dome to protect them as well. I can't say that I was perfectly calm in that scenario, but the reminder from these workers helped, and the understanding that God is here to protect us and those who serve him, and that allowed us to go through our day calmly and purposefully. Now let's turn over to Psalm chapter 121. Psalm 121, and we'll look at verses 7 through 8. I'm going to read this from the NIV, saying that for Joe and Jordan back there. And there was not and there is not peace in Israel. It's a location that just breeds territorial conflict. But there is a peace in the people of Israel, and a peace that God has protected them and delivered in the past and will protect and deliver them again and forevermore. Psalm 121, chapter 121, verse 7. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. In verse 8, the Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Now, if you combine this psalm with James 2:26, you can see this isn't 100% overarching protection. The body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. Praying to God for protection while putting yourself actively in danger isn't wise. But God will watch over you and protect you if you put your faith and works in him. So that was my first point, peace from physical threats. And my second point is peace in everyday life. I was able to have a life experience in Israel that I don't want to have again. I don't want to have it while I'm traveling, and I don't want to have it while I'm at home. And the people that are still dealing with it have a stress and anxiety in their life that most of us do not understand. But we are still living in a world that challenges us every day. As designed by God, we are met with conflicts on our beliefs, our faith, and sin every single day. Now, for me, I work in a job that's lower stress than a lot of other people because I don't deal with the public, I don't deal with the health and safety of other people, and my decisions don't necessarily impact other people's jobs. Now, I know we have a handful of people here who work in healthcare, and those jobs have a direct impact on the health and safety of other people. Kendall came to me this week and she said, twice in 2 days, I had a patient pass out on me. I must be a bad physical therapist. Now, I have to laugh because I know she's kidding, and I'm also going to stop there. That's as much as I'll try to embarrass her. I think I learned from Mark last week where that line is, so. But there are still things in my work that cause me stress and anxiety. I still have to commute into the office. I still have to work with people that have different levels of experience than I do, different perspectives, and that challenge me to improve and change. And some days, it's just hard to get shut down over and over again. It's hard to deal with the personalities of other people. Then I have to come home. Maybe I'll go for a run. Either I'll make dinner or do dishes, whichever turn Not really a turn, it's just whatever the timing works out. And then I go to bed and I do it all over again the next day. Please turn forward in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 6, verse 25. Matthew chapter 6, 25. Being a productive member of society and of an organization while also following the path that Jesus set is difficult. There's an active mindset that you need to have, and you can't just have that backhanded insult. You can't just interact with the vulgar coworker. You know, there's a different mentality that we have to have because we know in our mind what the issues are. So Matthew chapter 6, verse 25, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, or what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes?" Jesus says here that life is more than just your job and small decisions day to day, small decisions that don't affect the next year, they don't affect the year after, they don't affect eternity. It's all about working through the daily burden of life to find peace in God's presence. We have the weekly reminder of the Sabbath day to forget all of the stresses of work, to focus on the day, and to find peace in God's presence. But by living with His Spirit, we have the ability to focus on Him daily to find that peace. And not all doubts and anxieties are wrong. Peter wrote in 1 Peter to cast all of your anxieties on God because He cares for you. He recognizes that people will experience those anxieties. And even Jesus had similar feelings when He went to the Garden of Gethsemane in agony and prayed earnestly, so earnestly that His sweats were like drops of blood. Jesus gives us the example that you can have the emotions of fear and anxiety, but instead of letting it overtake Him and lead to a crippling shutdown, instead He turned His focus to prayer to God in an attempt to find clarity. God created this world for us to be challenged and tempted, to be trained to be teachers, priests, and rulers. God knew that there would be war times and peace times, and that when He interacted with humans in Jerusalem, there would always be wars and conflicts over who would control that area. He knew that we would be faced with smaller challenges day to day, and He also told us to find peace in Him. I'll close by saying it again. I'm glad to live in the United States. We here in Cleveland are blessed to live in the United States and to have peace from most physical threats day to day. We don't actively consider that God is protecting us from the physical threats because we don't live with them. But we can still find peace in God's presence by taking our daily decisions and stresses to Him, and we should and will continue to recognize the blessings of peace that God gives us.